the cartels are all suppressing methamphetamine tablets, and these look exactly like an Adderall pill.
New England, frozen streets, quiet houses, and a storm no one saw coming. At dawn, black SUVs roll into Boston's narrow alleys. Within minutes, doors crash open. By the time the sun rises, 171 suspects are in custody. Agents have seized over 500 pounds of narcotics, stacks of cash, and an arsenal of weapons. Officials call it the biggest cartel crackdown in New England history.
To nearly 200 arrests just in New England. The DEA says they were all members of the Sinaloa Cartel, the largest drug cartel in the world.
A joint strike by DEA and ICE, spanning 7 cities and months of surveillance. But beneath the numbers lies a different story of how a network stretching from Lawrence to Rhode Island slipped into the heart of Boston, and why some investigators now say this 200 cartel was just the beginning. This is the inside story of Operation Storm, where federal agents chased one of the most elusive supply chains on the East Coast. The investigation didn't start in Boston. It started 40 miles north in Lawrence, a factory town long known to federal agents as the crossroads of New England's drug trade. From a cluster of triple-deckers near Essex Street, shipments moved south through Methuen, Lowell, and Lynn, slipping onto I-93 before sunrise. According to U.S. attorneys' filings, encrypted phones coordinated runs that stretched into Rhode Island and New Hampshire. Each driver carried just enough product to look ordinary until agents traced a repeating pattern. Same routes, same drop windows, same cash pickups. When Homeland Security investigations joined the case, they began mapping social media orders, fake pill listings on Snapchat and Telegram that funneled users toward what looked like small-scale dealers. But behind the screen was one logistics network, moving fentanyl, cocaine, and methamphetamine by the kilo. By late spring, task force analysts had connected more than 200 suspects, couriers, stash house operators, and financiers tied to a loose Boston Lawrence ring. Agents began calling the 200 cartel. In USAO Massachusetts indictments, prosecutors allege the beat network handled hundreds of pounds of narcotics, dozens of firearms, and over $1 million in cash laundered through car washes, remittance apps, and even food delivery gigs. Each arrest pulled another thread. Phones led to suppliers, suppliers to stash apartments, apartments to quiet, suburban homes where weapons were stored beside counterfeit pill presses. By the time federal teams built the full picture, Boston was no longer just a hub. It was the command center of an interstate operation stretching from the Merrimack Valley to the coast of Rhode Island. And yet, agents say a few critical players were still missing. The question wasn't if they'd move again, only when. The sun hadn't yet cleared the rooftops when the call went out. Execute all warrants now. A fleet of federal vehicles converged on suburban cul-de-sacs across Massachusetts and Rhode Island. At exactly 4:37 a.m., teams breached the first target in Lawrence. Doors flew open. Flashbangs echoed. Agents rushed past stunned neighbors, weapons raised. Inside, they found it all. Kilograms of fentanyl stacked in duffel bags, loaded pistols under the couch cushions, manila envelopes stuffed with cash. By midday, the tally was staggering. In the New England region alone, 244 kilograms of drugs, 22,115 counterfeit pills, more than $1.3 million in cash, and 33 firearms were recovered. In one multi-state case, trucks hauled in 32 kilograms of methamphetamine from California, worth more than $10 million, hidden inside a tractor trailer that rolled through Andover late one summer night. Agents with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, and Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, said the synchronized strikes spanned 23 search warrants across towns from Methuen to Rhode Island simultaneously. The evidence tables were surreal plastic bins filled with sealed bricks of drugs, digital, scales still warm, stacks of cash with rubber bands labeled weekend drops. In some locations, agents found pill press machines, the silent factories turning fentanyl into deadly doses. One raid video shows agents breaking into a suburban home. A middle-aged man in sweatpants bolts out the back door, handgun visible, but is tackled shoulder first across the lawn. Nearby, children's toys lie strewn. It's a snapshot of chaos meeting calculation. Federal prosecutors emphasize the manpower. This was not a routine bust. It was an intelligence-driven, multi-agency operation targeting a trafficking network they say moved hundreds of pounds of narcotics, dozens of firearms, and millions in illicit cash. As agents carted flex cuffs and firearms into unmarked vans, residents watched from their porches. A neighbor later told reporters, We thought it was the FBI. The flashbangs were crazy. And although the strike dealt a major blow, law enforcement insiders concede. The operation hit mid-level couriers and stash houses, but the true kingpins? Still at large. Cut to a drone shot. Suburban rooftops, a quiet street now taped off. Federal cars parked with flashing lights. The scene of the crime doesn't always look like the movies, but the impact is real. Homes converted into stash houses, neighborhoods exposed to street-level violence, and a supply chain disrupted at least for now. In the aftermath of the raids, the numbers tell one story, but the pills tell another. On folding tables inside the DEA's Boston field office, agents lay out trays of counterfeit oxycodone tablets, identical in color, stamp, and size to real prescription meds. Only lab results reveal the truth. Nearly every pill laced with fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin. According to federal toxicology reports, just 2 milligrams, barely enough to cover Abraham Lincoln's beard on a penny, can kill an adult in seconds. And that's what makes these operations so lethal. These weren't just cartel pills. They were part of a mass production network designed to look harmless. Agents found industrial-grade pill presses, steel dies engraved with M30 or Xanax, and blue powder residue coating basement floors. In one suburban garage in Methuen, investigators said the air tested positive for fentanyl dust, the kind that can be fatal even by touch. Across New England, overdoses linked to counterfeit pills have tripled in 5 years, according to DEA New England's threat assessment. And the counterfeit surge is changing. Pills are now disguised as Adderall, Percocet, even anxiety medication traded through encrypted apps, delivered like pizza. Homeland Security agents say many of the buyers aren't addicts. They're students, workers, veterans, people who thought they were taking a legitimate prescription. But behind those pills were small, hidden labs, mini-assembly lines inside rental homes run by mid-level traffickers tied to what federal investigators dubbed the 200 Cartel. In one ICE case file, a courier described the operation as Amazon-style fulfillment. Orders came through private messages, payments through Cash App or crypto, shipments dropped in cereal boxes and vitamin bottles. It was efficient, invisible, profitable, and it nearly overwhelmed the region. By the time the raids hit, public health units across Massachusetts and New Hampshire were already dealing with a record wave of synthetic overdoses, many traced back to counterfeit pills seized in this very crackdown. These weren't movie villains or distant cartels. They were people mixing poison in local kitchens, packaging it like medicine, and shipping it into schools and suburbs. The DEA calls it the silent epidemic within the epidemic. And after Operation Storm, one question still lingers. How many more of these pills are still out there? When the press conference ended, headlines screamed, "Biggest cartel bust in New England history." But a few days later, another story began to surface, one that didn't fit neatly into the numbers. Reporters from the Boston Globe and NHPR started asking a harder question. Who were these 171 Sactor people? Court dockets showed that many of those arrested weren't cartel leaders at all. They were street-level runners, small-time couriers, and users caught in the supply chain's outer ring. One public defender in Franklin called it a sweep, not a strike. In a follow-up by the Concord Monitor, local officers admitted that several suspects were already known to them repeat offenders, not high-ranking traffickers. The supposed cartel looked less like a single empire and more like a network of desperate local operations loosely linked through Lawrence. Still, federal officials stood by the mission. To them, this was about cutting off the arteries that feed New England's fentanyl crisis. A single mid-level arrest could save dozens of lives downstream, the logic of volume over rank. Behind closed doors, agents also knew the risks. Operations like this, part deterrent, part message. We can reach into any town at any hour. But critics argue the spectacle, flashing lights, seized cash, dramatic photos can overshadow the systemic roots, poverty, addiction, and the easy digital trade of pills that never stop coming. Beat, tone shifts to quiet narration. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Yes, the raids pulled hundreds of pounds of narcotics off the street. Yes, they disrupted a dangerous pipeline. But they also revealed something deeper, a cycle that keeps rebuilding itself faster than law enforcement can tear it down. One veteran agent summed it up best. You can raid a house, you can seize the pills, but you can't raid the algorithm. And as Boston returned to normal the next morning, a sobering realization settled in. The operation ended. The crisis did not. In the weeks after Operation Storm, courtrooms across Massachusetts filled with quiet echoes, chains clinking, attorneys whispering, defendants staring down at tables. Some pleaded guilty. Others waited for their day in court. The biggest cases, the alleged suppliers, the interstate, traffickers moved into federal dockets under U.S. Attorney's Office supervision, each carrying sentences that could stretch for decades. But even as the ink dried on indictments, new seizures were already being logged. Another 23 kilograms in Andover, another truck stopped outside Worcester, another stash house in Nashua. Same packaging, same pill markings, same digital trail. The pattern hadn't stopped, it had simply shifted. Law enforcement officials describe it as hydrologic. Cut off one head, and two more appear rebuilt through encrypted chats. New drop points, new faces. Homeland Security investigators say the focus now is technology, tracing crypto wallets, AI scraping online pill ads, and mapping social media sales networks that span far beyond New England. At the DEA's Boston division, a senior agent gestures toward a massive pinboard covered in red. String. This isn't just about drugs, he says. It's about the infrastructure that lets them move. Public health advocates, meanwhile, are calling for something deeper treatment, not just takedowns. They argue the arrests mean little if the demand doesn't change. One recovery worker from Lowell put it simply, you can't handcuff addiction. The operation has become a case study in what modern enforcement looks like, where local detectives, federal agents, digital forensics, and AI analysts all share one battlefield, the algorithm itself. And for Boston, the fight is far from over. Federal prosecutors say the 200 cartel may have fractured, but its model remains. Microlabs, encrypted transactions, counterfeit pills made to look legitimate. The next raid could happen anywhere, at any time. Operation Storm may have ended, but its ripple spreads outward, through the streets, through the screens, through the lives left behind. For every arrest number on a press release, there's a human story of survival, relapse, loss, and the relentless effort to rebuild a safer city. In the end, the war on poison isn't fought in one night, it's fought every mid-morning when a community decides not to look away.